Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho, and it helps when you click the right button on the screen. Tonight we are going to go into our Myth and Tarot series, and we're going to be looking at the Ledon Dragon. So we'll be wandering back into the Herculean myths. Not where I was going to head, but this one keeps coming up, so we're gonna go with that one. And if you're new to the channel, what I do with Myth and Tarot is we go over a creature from mythology and then do a sample tarot reading for them as if the creature was sitting right across from me. There have been a couple of them that I'm not really sure I would have actually ever been that close to, just because they're a little on the creepy side. This one falls under that category. So, let's get started here. Okay, so, the Ledon Dragon, and it's spelled L-A-D-O-N, and when I looked up the phonetic way of speaking it, it's actually Ledon. So it's not Ledon or Latin, it's how they have it phrased. So the Ledon Dragon, or the Hesperian Dragon, is the other name, has three possible origin stories. Three lines of parentage, if you will. One, he was the firstborn offspring of Ceto and Phorcys, which were ocean deities that weren't quite titans, but they were older than the Olympians. He was one of the monstrous offspring of Typhon and Echidna, which is a terrifying thought just overall, and if you're wondering why I say that, you can go check out the videos for Typhon and Echidna that I've already done. They weren't pleasant creatures, Typhon especially. Or he was born from Gaia herself. In other words, she just popped out this monstrosity. The text mentions that he was born of Earth, which in that time period would have referenced Gaia, and then as you poke around a little bit, you find out that Gaia could have been one of the parents. There is a small vein of thought with the Ledon Dragon that says that he was born from Hera without Zeus's help. Not quite sure if I buy that one, just because Hera wasn't the greatest person ever. But this particular creature doesn't fit with anything in the line of Hera herself. So my personal thought is it's going to probably have come from Typhon and Echidna because of the way he's described shortly. So there is one other interesting possible family connection. Ptolemy said that Ledon was the brother of the Nemean lion, and there's also a reference later that they might have been a somehow relation to the Hydra, the Lemurian Hydra. So interesting family we got going on here. And I have a theory that I'm gonna go through when I actually go through Hercules, that he was actually going through and taking out a specific family line, which would have been the Typhon and Echidna family line, because he kind of went after a lot of their kin. That's, like I said, we've only went through a few of his adventures, but I'm actually going to try to do an episode on just Hercules, and we'll break all that down too, or at least include that. The Ledon Dragon could be one of three, possibly a fourth option, and let's hop forward a little bit into the description world, and you'll see why I think Typhon and Echidna is probably your best option. So, the Ledon Dragon was a huge serpent-like dragon. My mouse is being really weird, so when I go to scroll, it sometimes scrolls backwards instead of the way I want it to. It's driving me bonkers. Need to get a new one. But the Ledon was a huge serpent-like dragon. Kind of think like the big Asian dragons. That's the way he's described. In some stories, Ledon would have had the addition of wings. See, where did that go? There it is. So it's kind of like this guy here, because if you notice there, he's got some wings on this one. And what's interesting about this is a single-bodied dragon, but the heads are all over the place, but only one of the heads has wings. It was an interesting picture, and it also shows a little foreshadowing as to what his purpose was. We'll get into that again here shortly. He would wrap around the tree of the golden apples of the Hesperides garden. I'm not sure why I struggle with that word, but this is the golden apple tree, protecting the apples from theft from all oncomers. And I have to say, if I had a tree that was producing golden apples, I'm pretty sure that a dragon guarding it would be your best option. So, there are some branches of history that have the Ledon Dragon with many heads. For example, this little nightmarish creature. Lots of heads, some wings. But see, this one's not the genuine description because he's not fully serpentine. He has front legs, and it's kind of more of a werven because you've got the legs on the wings, plus the bazillion heads, but you also have back legs, so not quite the true serpentine dragon. And with these legends, it says he could have had as many as 100 heads, which is probably more of this description than anything else. Not unlike the Hydra, but without the multiplication aspect. He would still regenerate a limb or a head or a wing if it was severed, but it wouldn't cut off one, 2 grew in its place, or 3 grew in its place, or however many the Hydra tended to actually produce. It was also said that when Ledon spoke, each head spoke in a different voice. And it was interesting because a couple of the references that, as I was going through, because I was curious if it was the chaotic voice of Typhon, and it said that it was not, the voices were not in chaos. They spoke as one, just different tones. So terrifying, absolutely. But chaos, not so much. Again, this is where I'm thinking that Typhon and Echidna were his parents. But can you imagine up to 100, depending on the lore, voices speaking from each head? So you have 100 heads, 100 voices, each speaking the exact same words, so there was a central brain type concept here. Much like a choir, but instead of singing, it would just be speaking, which is huge. But this is all coming from one being. I mean, that would be pretty awesome, really. And Ledon was thought to be immortal, and that's something that comes into play a little bit later. But we're going through the description of him, and that kind of fits into this part of the story. So he's described as up to 100 heads on a serpentine body, possibly with wings. Each head had a different voice. And if I was better at all the interneting thing or the technology thing, it would be kind of fun to try to replicate that type of a voice with a voice tuner, but I'm not there yet. So and yep, I'm doing the Synergy Kombucha Peach Paradise. Again, not sponsored, but definitely a good kombucha. So anyway, and when I was going through figuring out kind of his description, because there's only a lot of the main stories that I was finding, they only talk about him as a serpentine dragon that Hercules went after. So trying to find exact descriptions was a little bit more tricky, but I did find an interesting tidbit. And I love this type of stuff because it's usually a one-off, like one story veered off and had this one little thing. And this was one of them. It was said that in one version of this myth that Ledon would kiss people coming to attack him. Think about that. Think about this thing, one of those faces, deciding that you were just totally, I need to put a little peck on your forehead, not on your life. And I like dragons, but no. And the kiss had a unique poison attached to it. It would turn any attacker into a plant for the Hesperides garden. Fierce, terrifying, 100-headed dragon that would not kill you with its kiss, but incapacitate you with that kiss. You wouldn't die, but now you're a plant in a titan's garden. Fun. And the titan part comes in shortly. I guess the hero Hercules, this was one of his 12 labors, and I say I guess hero. There's a few characters in Greek myth that we today glorify, Hercules being one of them. But some of the things that he did was not that great. And his stepmother, we won't even go into that one yet, but she also shows up here. So, one of Hercules' labors, 12 labors, was to collect the apples from this particular garden. This is generally believed to be the 11th labor. So, why was the Ledon Dragon guarding this apple tree with golden apples anyway? I mean, I personally think dragon guarding apple tree, especially golden apple tree, best option ever. But why was Ledon guarding this tree in particular? Apparently Zeus, according to one branch of the story, gifted his wife Hera this tree that produces golden apples. The other primary vein of thought is that Gaia gave the tree to Hera as a wedding gift when she married Zeus. Cool gift, it's just too bad the relationship between the two was so tumultuous. Basically, Zeus, we get it, you're fertile, but you don't need to go after every single thing on the planet. Anyway, this tree produced fruit that was made of gold, so apples that are just pure gold. They were gold outside as well as within, but they were still edible, which I want one. And it was said that these apples would grant immortality to any mortal who ate them, and extend health and life of any immortal that ate them. So this was a god's fruit. Now we know why we have such a monstrous creature guarding this golden apple tree. Hera would have put the plant in the westernmost part of the known world, in the garden of Hesperides, which was a type of very beautiful nymph that lived within this garden. Obviously their names were the Hesperides, so it's their garden. And they added some protection to the tree. It was also thought that this particular garden was Hera's treasure house, so wherever she got something new that she didn't want Zeus getting a hold of, she would put it in this garden, which is not a bad idea. It was thought that the Hesperides would feed and care for the dragon. So you got the dragon wrapped around the tree protecting it. Then you also have these beautiful nymph Hesperides running amok amongst, and they were running amok amongst the garden as well, protecting it. So you've got multiple layers of protection for this one thing, which is impressive. In this vein of thought, where the Hesperides would feed and kind of take care of the dragon as well, the nymphs were, for the most part, very kind to the dragon. There was actually nothing that they did that was outright mean, but on occasion, because they were nymphs after all, they would drug Ledon with a sleeping potion so that he would pass out and his 100 heads would all close their eyes at the same time, and then they would steal the apples for themselves. So this dragon was kind of a center point for this particular little garden they had going on. The garden in the western part of the world is thought to have been within the Atlas Mountains. Atlas, the Titan, wanted to keep an eye on his daughters, the Hesperides. Another aspect of the lore said this garden could have been in the mythical land of Hyperborea in the far north. I like the idea that Atlas, being a doting father, wanted to keep his kids close, at least keep an eye on them, so they weren't doing anything too destructive. I mean, they really didn't. From what I could find, they pretty much stayed within the garden, which is good. A lesser-known version of the story was that the garden was in the land beyond the borders of the world, actually more closely aligned with the underworld or a place between worlds. Personally, I'm going to stick with the tree was either in Hyperborea or in the Atlas Mountains because, again, that's the most common version of it, and it honestly makes more sense. The other version of it being in the underworld or between worlds is, even according to the historians I was going through, said that was something that was brought up closer to the 2nd century AD versus the original story, which was quite a while before the Common Era. So we're going to go with the older stories. It is said in most of the stories that Zeus found the tree, if we're going with the Zeus as a gift option, found the tree in the east and brought it to Hera, and then she moved it further to the west. This image is on various pots and vases, again, around the 2nd century AD, and one of those would be something along this lines, where you have the Ledon Dragon wrapped around the tree. There's little apples on the tree, and this thing over here is supposed to be Hercules. Not one of the better versions of Hercules I've ever seen, just to be completely honest with you, but it could have been Hercules. There's weirdly not a lot of clay pots depicting this, at least not stuff I could find online. There were a couple, but when I started to source them back, they didn't go to a museum, they went to some kind of AI generated nonsense. So I wanted to be authentic with those, and that was the only one I could find that actually was a museum aspect. So I know they're out there, it's just finding them is always a trick. Back to Hercules and his ark. The Ledon Dragon was guarding the tree, and there were so many different variables about this story, so I'm kind of giving you both sides and then what my thoughts are on each one, because good grief, there are 2 possible stories involving Hercules. The first, and they are about the same age as far as length or time ago, so it's not sure which one is which. The first one is that Hercules shot an arrow at Ledon and killed him, and the arrow that he was used was poisoned with apparently Ledon's sister's blood, the Hydra, and in this version, the body of Ledon, remember he was immortal, so killing that is not easy or pleasant. He twitched and writhed for days after the arrow was shot into him. In other words, very slow, very painful way to go. The theory or the story goes with this one: Hercules stole the golden apples and fled, and as the Jason and the Argonauts returned from collecting the golden fleece, they went by the island where the Hesperides garden was located, and they could hear the thrashing of Ledon's body as he passed, and pretty much terrified them away from the land. So not the most pleasant way to go if it takes you days to finish. And you know, Hercules, being such a good hero, took his apples and rushed back to say, look, I finished the labor. The Hesperides were in such a state at this particular atrocity because they did actually like the dragon. They didn't hurt him, they just knocked him out every so often so they could have an apple. It was said that there was wailing and flailing of their arms in grief at the passing of their friend, pet, not sure how to view that. But the other version, and this one is a bit more interesting as far as what we're doing with this series, and that is the Ledon Dragon was not killed. He was tricked. Hercules went to Atlas, the Titan holding up the world. In some lore they say just holding up the sky, but either way, he was carrying a weight on his shoulders. And Atlas was the father of the Hesperides nymphs. So here comes Hercules, asks for a favor, kind of tricks Atlas into giving aid, and Hercules decided he would take the weight of the sky or the world from Atlas for a short time. Atlas went to the garden, and since he was the father of the Hesperides, Ledon would allow the nymphs to collect the apples because it was Atlas that was requesting them. Atlas would take the apples, thank his daughters, and return to Hercules, but he kind of was like, I'm free, you're not, you deal with it, deuces, dude. But Hercules, and I'm not sure where he got this particular level of cunning, because in the old lore he was smart, but it was like lucky smart, and this is an example of that. He would trick Atlas into taking back the sky or the earth when his I just lost the name of his outfit. His cloak shifted wrong, and he almost dropped Earth, and Atlas jumped in to save the day, and Hercules collected his apples and took off, basically laughing. So, like I said, there's a couple of little quirks like that make it funny. But in this particular version of it, the Ledon Dragon is not killed. He isn't really celebrated, though, because he still let Hercules get the apples, and that was the big no-no there, so not the best move, just in general. Now, let's look back at the lore around the 12 labors of Hercules. Hercules, according to the lores, was not to have any aid performing these labors. But he was able to get aid on this task, and it would seem that the Olympians kind of ignored his assistance, which is interesting because Atlas was serving punishment. That's why he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. So I'm not sure what happened there, because Hera tended to have her eye on this whole situation with Hercules, and yet she missed this one. So fun. Of course, there were people who tried to take away the magic from these stories later on. There is a branch of thought, and this is an exceptionally unpopular line of thought from what I could find. This lore states that Ledon was actually a shepherd. I'm not sure how he went from 100-headed serpentine dragon protecting a golden apple tree, to a sheep herder, but this was one of the weird theories that they postulated later to understand better the story. The story kind of explained itself. I'm not really sure why we're playing with it. Anyway, Ledon was a shepherd, and he was guarding a flock of golden fleeced sheep. Sounds like we're switching into Jason and the Argonauts here, not Hercules and his 12 labors, which there is some crossover, don't get me wrong, but this doesn't follow the vein of the stories, so there's that. But even the author of this particular thought states that he's making a suggestion to maybe clarify or further define the actual story. Sheep with golden fleece, apple tree, golden apples. Not quite the same thing, considering at two different times people went after the different aspects, and they weren't the same people going after the same thing. So why not just leave the story the way it was and write something new? And that could be said for some things in the modern day as well. There's a lot out there, and yet you keep remaking the same things. Anyway, this is not the end of Ledon's tale, though. Ledon, whether he was killed or just tricked, would eventually be placed in the sky as the constellation Draco by none other than Zeus himself. In the primary version, if he was killed, Zeus is the one that carried him up, but there's another version, which is not as popular, but it was still fairly common apparently, that said that Hera would place him in the stars for the loyalty he showed in defending the tree, which I like that idea. And you know what, well, let's just go full-blown in the feels today. Let's go super optimistic, get those good feeling vibes going, because, you know, Ledon wasn't a bad creature in reality. Let's go with the theory my personal theory, and I think it's fun, so I'm going to tell you, that Zeus and Hera, because they were fairly distraught over what happened, would place the body or the spirit of Ledon into the stars together. I'm almost positive this is not how this went, but we're being all in the feels, so we'll just play with that for now. But either way, Ledon became the constellation Draco in the northern sky. And just for a side note, as I was going through and going over a lot of this information, I ran across someone who broke down the etymology of the name Ledon. And I kind of thought it was fun, so here we go. It was not a common term, that name, in the original stories. It was referenced, but it wasn't around that time period. This was a unique word. The earlier writers would reference this dragon as Dracon, or Ophis, which was great serpent-like being, and it is speculated that this was referring to his family line of serpent-like beings. Again, going back to Typhon and Echidna, because Typhon was a gigantic serpent mad god with the last name of On. And when we go with that line of thought, serpent-like being ONs, we had Typhon, Python, even Ledon's other name in some of the older writings, which was Dracon, had the ON ending. And that was, to me, kind of interesting because they did actually kind of weave these groups together. The serpent-likes were tending to have the last names of On. There were exceptions to that, like the Hydra and Echidna herself, but if we're going to go with the On being for the male dragon-likes, maybe having the A at the end was the female version. Who knows? But it was kind of interesting just to see that they actually tried to break down the word and source it as a family lineage, and going with that particular lineage, it sticks Typhon as the father of Ledon. So that's kind of cool. And Ledon, interesting, is not forgotten. Not even today. The name's a little odd, you don't hear it very often, but he's not forgotten. He makes an appearance in the Percy Jackson books about the kid who's a demigod born in modern time. And I've only read one of those books, and I really should sleep more at night. But I get wrapped up in researching, so I would like to one of these days read that entire series. Just have to set the time aside. I've been looking a bit more into them because they keep popping up when I'm looking for modern day media associated with different of these deities and creatures. And apparently Rick Riordan, who wrote the Percy Jackson books, really did his research, because most of the comments are, this is surprisingly historically accurate about a certain thing. I mean, they're brought into the modern day, so there's a whole myth there, or a whole new fiction there. But the overall themes and the descriptions, the actions, the antics of these beings were pretty accurate according to what I was seeing. Where'd that go? So, I mean, that is something to think about. Is that the one? Yeah, there we go. I am looking for one thing real quick, and then we will get into our tarot. And when we talk about the tarot in this aspect, of course, this stuff is for fun. It's not meant for serious interpretation, obviously. Stop. And but this is, like I said, this is one of those things where we do a little mock reading just to get an idea if Ledon was sitting in front of me right now, what his tarot reading would be. And I use the Celtic Cross Basics spread for this particular reading, and I use the Tarot Art Nouveau deck, which is a really fun deck. It's a little bit on the racy side, so if you notice my fingers in the middle of a card, it's probably because I'm having to old school style censor the images. And yes, I could use a different deck, but this is the one that is the most interesting for this type of a reading, and honestly, it's, I don't know, it's kind of fun, because we're kind of, a lot of the beings we're talking about are Greco-Roman right at the moment, so having a deck that is stylized, not directly, but stylized in that same genre of art kind of makes sense to me. So we'll hop on through this little reading and wrap this episode up. So the significator, this is the Ledon Dragon in this moment in time, is the number 19, the sun. And the sun means he's the star of the show. And if you look in the background, it actually is a star there. You've got your suns up here, you've got the divine masculine energy coming forward, but the divine masculine is holding a child as well. So this is in his role as father. The mother's down here being very supportive in her lunar state. But with this, you have Ledon in a very powerful role. It's not referenced, interestingly enough, in any of the myth or lore, if it ever spawned children. But with this one, it could be the fact that his spawning of mystery, the spawning of creativity, is what's coming forward. Because in this moment, he is in the aspect of a father figure or a divine sire, so to speak. And I don't mean that in royalty, I'm meaning it as in reproduction. So where he's at right now, his image and his concept is very fertile to help spread more creativity about the ancient divinities and critters, we'll call them, from back in the day that could or could not have existed in some part of our history. The thing that's crossing him is the Knight of Wands. So there's a little bit of aggressive fire trying to hide him. There's some things that are working against him, and it's untamed passion is what I'm hearing. So he is in the position to be the inspirational father figure, that inspirational divine masculine, not fully divine because he wasn't referenced as a god, but he was definitely an immortal. But the thing that's crossing him is this untamed passion. Like, yeah, he wants to do all this cool stuff, but can he keep himself under control? Or is he going to become a babbling idiot like his father, who is Typhon, is how it tends to line up? Or was he going to be a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more put together? Echidna was an immortal that actually predated, according to the lore, the Titans. So she was an ancient being, and she wasn't spiteful or hateful. Her passions were much more in control, which is unique. But Typhon was out of control, and so what's crossing him is that what if scenario. What if I let my passions get out of control? How disastrous could this be? And as this is what's crossing him, or his biggest obstacle in life, kind of makes sense. His higher self, or the divine highest influences, is the Hierophant. Wisdom is his friend. And as it's a major arcana, this is a major life lesson. So the thing that's coming in for him is this high level of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. It also ties into being a one-on-one teacher, which also goes back to him as the son, where in his position as a father figure, you would be teaching the next generation. So Ledon could actually be in a situation where he is coming forward to kind of wake people up or remind people that in all ancient lore and myth, there's an element of truth and reality. So, something to think about. His subconscious self, or lower self, and this is where we have to edit a little bit, is the Nine of Pentacles. It's that whole, you're almost there, you've almost got it, you're not quite finished, and now you're feeling that, am I doing the right thing feeling. Everything is kind of lined up for Typhon at this point. Everything's moving in the right direction. There is this energy of, I'm not good enough, probably because he feels like he failed. He let Atlas and the Hesperides get the apples, and they weren't supposed to go to Hercules, and so he kind of has that, I almost completed my task and my mission in life, but I failed. Well, if his failure is being put amongst the stars, that's amazing. That's a whole shoot for the moon. Even if you don't hit it, you'll land for the stars. That's the energy of his shadow, is like, I just didn't do good enough. And my only response to that is, dude, look where you ended up. You're still in lore today. You're still being used in astrology charts even today as the constellation Draco. So yeah, you may not have done best when you were here, but you're doing good up there. His recent past, being an immortal, will go back a couple hundred years, is the King of Wands. Been there, done that. He's learned to conquer his passions in the past. There's still some temptation going on here, but he knows where he's at. He knows what he can accomplish, and he protected the tree for a significant period of time before Hercules and his little tricks showed up. So as far as his immediate past, the King of Wands, he's been there, he's done that. He knows that he can accomplish the tasks that are put before him, and he knows that he is 100% within his ability to control his passions. His immediate future is the Four of Wands. There's a lot of fire going on here. I mean, obviously he's a dragon, so there's going to be some fire, but this is a lot of fire. The Four of Wands, there is someone coming in to help. There is assistance being offered. Assistance to support, assistance to build up, assistance to step into something better in the future. And that assistance could be coming in from some aspect of the feminine, which could be his mother, Echidna. It could be Hera coming in to be like, hey, you did a good job, let's keep going. But there's some energy of a feminine aspect, a high frequency, almost divine aspect that's stepping forward to help and support him. The Four of Wands is not knowing if you need assistance, but assistance shows up at the right moment, and that's what's his next couple hundred years is looking at, is the assistance is coming in, he just doesn't realize he needs it yet. So his current attitude, kind of like the sun is where he is at in a like more physical overall perspective. This is stuff that's going through his head. It is number 15. It's the Devil card. The Devil card is the contrarian. The things that are going through his head are actually working against him. Like, he has these genius ideas. He has these thoughts that he wants to continue to build on, but the Devil's like, seriously, you are not good enough. What are you thinking? But that also ties into the shadow, or the lower self, the Nine of Wands. So you've got these two energies. His subconscious mind, his shadow, is like, oh, I almost did the right thing. I'm almost there, but I'm just not good enough. And then you've got the Devil as his attitude, like, I am so stupid. I can't even believe I let that idiot Hercules, of all of the people, I let Hercules steal the apples I was guarding. I can't believe Hera's even still talking to me. Like, this is ridiculous. That's kind of where his attitude is. Like, he's got the offer of help going forward. He's got the assistance being brought in, but where he's at right now, he don't see it. His current environment is the Hermit. He's in isolation. So whether he's in the stars, whether he's in a spirit world, wherever he's at this moment, he's alone. But the Hermit doesn't mean you're solitary by force. He chose to step away. So in the far north, in the constellations, if he's hanging out up there, or more, like I said, wherever else he's at, he's alone because he's kind of processing through things. He's getting things sorted in his head. It's taken him probably a good 2,000 years. He's an immortal. That's like that much time to him. So he's still working on some stuff. But right now he's in a solitary position, working on cleaning things up in his head, because he didn't really mess up, so to speak, but he was tricked. And that's saying something, considering he lived around nymphs that would randomly put him to sleep, which is not as big of a trick. But he was tricked into failing at his job, and he'd been doing it for a really long time really well. So his isolation, where he's at in this moment, is his way of trying to sort all of that. Like, how did it happen? His hopes and fears are number 8, the Justice card. And with Justice, his hope is that he is found in the best possible light. Fear is he's going to get ripped out of the sky and cast into the abyss. And that's not what that's his fear. His hope is that time judges him more gently than he's judging himself right now, because this is how he's judging himself. Not the greatest. That's the devil. He is judging himself very harshly, but his hope is that history remembers him in a much more gentle light. Yeah, he was monstrous for that time, but does it mean he was evil? No. That's the reason I say Typhon and Echidna would make more sense of his parents, because Typhon being a father, those passions that were untamed that are crossing him, that would be very much the father side of his lineage. But Echidna was a much more, she was still hideous and monstrous, but she wasn't as hostile as her errant husband was. So Justice is hoping that he is judged more gently, but his fear is being cast into forgottenness and into the abyss of lost memories. The overall outcome, and again with the fire, how many fires do we have? 1, 2, 3. The sun is fire. We have wands crossing him. 4 of wands, king of wands, and then this wand. So that's 1, 2, 3, 5 fire aspects in this reading. That's a lot of fire. The 9 of wands is his final outcome. And again, we're going into this concept of a partnership, a friendship, a feminine aspect coming in to be supportive. The 4 of wands, this lady right here in the yellow, she is carried on into the 9 of wands, but the person helping her has changed. In the first one, it looks more like Diana or Persephone. In this one, this strikes me more as like Hera is actually the one that's coming in to help. So when we look at it from that perspective, the final outcome is he's not going to be forgotten. He's going to be remembered. With luck, justice will be on his side, and he won't be judged too harshly. But it's going to be someone like Hera, who was his divine feminine patron, who was there to support and was actually pretty upset from what I could find when he either failed or passed away. And that's why she wanted to make sure his spirit or his essence was secured in the stars. So even with her on his side, she's, when we go by the Greek myths, she's still on his team, like Team Ledon, trying to bring his memory back into the present moment and bring him back into a more peaceful state of existence. So with that, we'll end this mythological tarot reading, and thank you guys for the support. My little channel here is growing, and that's because of you guys, and I really appreciate that. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button. Let's keep growing our little village here. And if you enjoyed this video, drop a like on it, comment, let me know what your thoughts are, if you've ever heard of the Ledon Dragon, if this is something new to you. And if you have any ideas or topics that you want to see gone over, especially in the mythological creature world, drop them in the comments down below. I do read my comments, and I will check those out. With that, I will let y'all go. Have a great rest of your week, and if you ever find a dragon protecting a golden apple tree, let me know. But that'll talk to you later.